Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 6 of SANTES, a podcast for future ancestors. I'm Luna Bruja.
And I'm Storm Miguel Flores. Before we get into this episode, we want to talk a little bit about the SANTES project, which is where this podcast idea came from. First, we chose the name SANTES Project as a continuation of the syncretism that was practiced by our ancestors whose temples and shrines to their gods were buried and destroyed by Spanish colonizers. With Catholicism forced on us, indigenous peoples of Latin America covertly brought in our own deities and archetypes to fit into the Catholic practice of praying to and venerating saints. Some of the most prominent Mexican saints, for example, are Santa Muerte and Our Lady of Guadalupe. This feels very queer to me. As trans and queer people, we've always found ways to covert language and reclaim practices for our survival. We also have archetypes who are venerated in our communities too, like the fierce queen, the mother, the high femme, the baby dyke, the dapper zaddy, and more than I can possibly list here. I like to think that when we become ancestors, the barriers and structures that keep us in human form go away, and our connection to source or power is so much stronger, which is why people reach to the ancestors for support.
Exactly. And in the case of the SANTES Project, we're inviting queer and trans BIPOC to canonize ourselves as the beautiful, messy, miraculous beings that we are, and we get to decide for ourselves if and how we will support the living when we become ancestors. We do this through the SANTES form. You can find it on our website at www.santesproject.com.
Since we're asking people to answer questions about someday becoming an ancestor, we figure it's only fair if we share some of our answers with you. This episode, I want to start with a question to you, Luna. What are you the saint of, or what gifts do you want to offer people when you become an ancestor?
I want to be the saint of many things, but I also want to be the saint of lucky chaos. Think the Wheel of Fortune tarot card. I want people to invoke me when they're at their lowest low point in life. I'm talking homeless, heartbroken, hurt, or going through those heavy life shenanigans that weigh you down and you literally have nowhere to go. I want to be the ancestor that gives you something unexpected, something wild, whether that's assisting with a new career or housing situation, or giving you an unexpected lover that makes you question everything you thought you knew about yourself. Like, please, 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 please pray to me when your life feels stagnant, out of control, or just plain boring and you want something to spice it up, and I'll give you the gift of chaos.
Oh my gosh. So like basically a continuation of what you do now times what, 10, 20, 100.
Call me out, Storm Miguel. Yes.
No, I love it. And so take it or leave it. But for this episode, at least, I canonize you, Sante Causite. Okay, I'm going to have to say this like a million times. Sante Causite de la Fortuna. If I'm canonizing you this, I need to know how to say it. My Spanish, I never said it was anything. So, Sante Causite de la Fortuna. That is what I canonize you for at least this episode.
I will take it. I have been anointed, and it will not be the last time.
It will not be the last time. In fact, I think we should just do this every time we have an episode.
Hell yeah, I'm so down.
A tradition is born, or not. We'll see. We will see. Time will tell. So I'm so excited to introduce today's guest, someone who I've admired deeply from the moment we met when we did a virtual folk show together early in the pandemic. Lazarus Letcher is a brilliant artist and writer from the Midwest, now living in the ancestral and unceded Tiwa land in New Mexico. Lazarus is a string instrument player, primarily plays the viola, and a singer-songwriter. You'll hear some of their gorgeous music in this episode. Lazarus is also a PhD candidate in American Studies with a focus on Black and Indigenous liberation and queer and trans studies. To learn more about their work, check out the description of this episode wherever you are listening.
In this episode, Lazarus talks about the current erasure of trans history, how house decor turned out to be protective wards, and an ancestor story involving a horseback break for freedom. Without further ado, let's welcome Lazarus Letcher to the podcast.
And welcome all of you to SANTES.
Welcome, Laz. Welcome to the SANTES Podcast. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Hi, Les.
Happy to be here.
One of the things we like to do when we start our podcast is to open the space, invite our ancestors in. Right now, I'm burning some incense, actually, that Storm Miguel gave me last Sunday. They smell really fucking good, and it's just filling the air with some smoke right now. But yeah, to kick it off, Lazarus, is there anyone that you would like to call in? Any ancestors that might be visiting with you today or that you're thinking about?
Yeah, I was just making some music and I want to call in my ancestor, Carol Nance, who was my great grandma. I am a many generations musician and it's mostly because of her. And I also want to call in my ancestor, Dempsey Spencer, whose name I just learned this summer, who was, he self-emancipated in 1861. And his daughter, Susie, who then tried to sue the US government, who is now my phone background. I don't know if you can see that very stern looking Black woman in the front.
Yes.
She integrated a Kansas high school in the 1800s. Whenever I'm feeling a little something about working on my PhD, she gives me some ancestral side eye to keep me going.
That's amazing. I'm so glad you know those ancestors and you have their photos. That's such a treasure. That's incredible. How about you, Storm Miguel? Who were you calling in today?
Well, today would have been, and I've called him in before, but today would have been my dad's 93rd birthday. So I'm calling in my dad, Joe Flores, in again. I realized I didn't say much about him last time. So I just want to say he was a complicated person like the rest of us. And he would have been the first to say that he was far from being a saint. And he loved rancheras and huapangos. Sorry, Dad. I know I mispronounced that. And one of his favorite albums was Linda Ronstadt, Canciones de mi Padre. But he also loved Willie Nelson and Marty Robbins. He loved jazz music. I got turned on to some really cool stuff because of him, but I was a teenager, so I didn't appreciate it that much. He'd come into my room and be like, check out this Ray Charles album. I'd be like, okay, cool, Dad, just leave it there. And then I wouldn't listen to it. And he died when I was 19, so I didn't really get to be an adult and have that appreciation. So I've definitely had the appreciation of it as an adult and, want to be able to share that with him. I've been talking about making a mixtape for him for a very long time. I just haven't done it, but I think that would be a really nice way for me to connect with him and be like, Dad, check this out, and listen for anything that maybe I'll be inspired to check out in the middle of that. So yeah, I just want to say, hey, Dad, welcome and happy birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
What about you, Luna?
Yeah, I've been watching a lot of Drag Race lately, and it's helping me connect with queer culture, but it's also, I had a drag mom back in Oakland, and they passed away. It's been a number of years now, maybe 10 years or so. But I've been thinking about them a lot the past few weeks because they were super creative. And I remember one of my last memories with them was I was at their house and they were sewing popcorn to this corset, and then we went out to a drag show and they pulled out all this popcorn and threw it at the audience, and it was just so fun and very memorable, and they were just very loud and femme and just really, really such a sweet person. So yeah, they've been on my mind lately in terms of just creativity and being a queer artist.
Welcome to all our ancestors.
Welcome.
And, any of the others that show up that are here to support us and be loved by us. And, you've already mentioned, you kind of get the side eye from your ancestor. What is overall, what is your relationship to ancestor practice? And then moving into we can get into it, but of course, this goes into how do you envision yourself? What kind of ancestor do you want to be? But starting with just what is your relationship to ancestors and ancestral practices?
Yeah. I didn't grow up with ancestral practices, which I think is pretty common for a lot of Black Americans. And then my sophomore year in college, I grew up in small town Indiana, which is a very character building place to grow up, Black and trans. And then I was let me go to Minnesota. Let me go somewhere colder and whiter. And I was in a music school. I was playing viola. I was living my dreams, but also really struggling. In my sophomore year, I got just a very strong message that was you have to go to Ghana. And I was okay, I don't know anything about Ghana. And I applied for this program, the McNair program. It's an incredible thing for BIPOC scholars, first gen students, and got accepted, even though I shouldn't have. And that funded my trip to Ghana. Like, got on a plane at 20 by myself. I met a guy who played the Geel. His name is Bernard Woma. It's another ancestor I want to bring into this space. This incredible Geel player, which is like the ancestor to the xylophone. And it kind of rattles your bones as you play it. It's just such like a deep, lovely resonance. And I just like got on a plane at 20 and I was like, I really hope this guy I met at a concert is at this airport to pick me up. But yeah, that's where my ancestral practice really took off, was being the first person in my family to go back to West Africa since enslavement, and just like learning the music and the dances that my ancestors might have learned, the heaviness of going to like Cape Coast Castle, and just, I mean, I've tried to like put words to it many times. That's the only place for sure I will ever know, like, this is where my ancestors stepped foot in Africa, and standing at the door of no return and being like, okay, for some reason I was the one that was called back. So yeah, I talk to them every day. I've got an altar for them. I feel like they've gotten a lot louder in my life since I had a brush with death. But yeah, and I do like a lot of, I know there's some very deeply personal practices, but yeah, I like to chat with them. The side eyes are loving. I know that for sure. The side eyes are loving. I'm just like, my job is largely to write, and it was illegal for them to read or write, and what an absolute gift. So I feel like they keep me humble, and yeah, I feel like they rejoice in me and see my queerness, see my transness, see my wholeness. And sometimes I do exhaust them, but yeah.
What a gift. I think you're also their gift. Like, I think that if I were thinking of like my ancestors and like generations in the future, I would want them to have everything, like, this is what we survived for. This is what we're paving the road for. And for you to be able to write when they couldn't and to travel back home when they couldn't, I think all of that is like kind of the culmination of their dreams coming true, so that's amazing that you get to live that life, and that they're being loud, and it sounds like celebratory of like what you're able to do for your lineage.
Thank you. Yeah, when you said that, I heard my grandma Thelma very loudly, who was like 4'8" on a good day, just like fearless as hell. And just whenever my parents would try to like gently correct me, like I was very spoiled, but with grandma it was like next level. It'd always be, you leave my baby alone.
Before we spoke with you today, like before this conversation, I've been thinking a lot about what you mentioned, your brush with death that happened not too long ago. And it wasn't lost on me, like, that we're sitting here talking about, we're asking people in a way that oftentimes is kind of thinking of it in a fun way or in a kind of joyous way, like, oh, what kind of ancestor do you want to be? And I can tell you how grateful I am that I get to have this conversation with you, because I know that there was a moment where that might not have been. And knowing that you are here doing this work, and I've gotten to know you more in the past, 6 months? I don't remember when you did the first article and we had the biggest conversation we've had, but that was just really wonderful and lovely. So I just want to say that's not lost on me that we're asking this kind of really, like, it can feel like a heavy question when you're like, no, this shit just like, this could happen anytime.
Yeah.
That's also why we want to be having these conversations, because it could happen at any time. And we want to know what all of us want and need, not only while we're here, but after.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I've always thought about death a lot. I was a weird little kid.
Same.
Right? Little goth trans babies. But yeah, like my master's thesis was specifically on like transgender murder memorials, and how do we honor trans people well when they're gone, especially when they're taken by violence. And that's what my dissertation is on. It's called Chasing Ghosts, Memorializing Queer and Trans Lives in a Time of Spectacular Erasure. And I was working on this when I, survived my own murder attempt. And it's definitely changed my perspective on a lot of things, but very much feel like I am still here because my ancestors said not today. Or said, like, you got a little more marinating to do before you can join our ranks,
So how do you envision yourself as an ancestor? What kind of ancestor do you want to be when the time comes in, hopefully the very far future, when we're all just like old and cranky and all the good stuff?
Yeah, I've got my sights set on triple digits.
Yeah.
Heck
Very
yes.
excited to be like an ornery old black man. That sounds really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I envision myself being the like, come here, baby, the like respite and also the fierce protector. Like, I know I've got a lot of protectors in my bloodline. That's why I'm still here. But like a cheerleader that will also shank the enemies if
Mm,
necessary.
mm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got some power. The ancestors and what they've accomplished, like you definitely have a lot of power in you, which is amazing to know. Like as an ancestor, you'll only get stronger.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mhm. One of my favorite things about working with ancestors is kind of like messages we get from them. Like like
Mm.
you mentioned, like you kind of heard your grandma a moment ago. And it also sounds like maybe they come through with music as well. But yeah, I'm curious, like, what are some like moments or like messages you've received with your ancestors?
Mm. Yeah, I feel like a lot of my ancestor practice I've stumbled into and then gotten like verification later talking to people that are initiated in specific African traditional religions of like, oh, that's why I do. It's like there's this giant snake plant behind me, for instance, and I have those all around my house. I've always been really drawn to them. I've always wanted them by my entrances, and then found out after like a decade of having them around my home that in West Africa, in Nigeria, they're seen as protection. They're called like Oya's swords, and Oya's, an Orisha that I've worked with a lot. And it's like, oh, I just always felt so drawn to do that. Or right before the shooting I survived, these are like indigo water jars. And I put these around my house, and I felt really drawn to put one on my fence, on my front fence. And then a week later, my neighbor shot a gun at me 8 times. The area around the jar was completely riddled with the bullets. The jar was untouched, and the jar lined up with where I jumped my back fence to get away. And so just these little moments of like, I don't know why I'm doing this. So far, it sounds like my ancestors really come through with home decor, which is very gay, but like, wouldn't this look cute here? And it's like, oh, and I'm still alive. Thank you.
Yeah.
I know your language.
Yes, I know my language. And then definitely through music. Yeah, I play the viola, which is in between the violin and the cello. I joke it's like the trans boy of the orchestra. Like it exists in all of the orchestras. No one knows we're there. It's got a voice that sometimes cracks, this little in-between voice. But we're an essential part of the community, gosh darn it. But it's really, since I started T, it's really close to my own voice. So I can resonate my instrument with my voice. And if I hit the right note, it resonates my body. And the music I do, especially with Stages of Tectonic Blackness, where we do these 8-hour long ritual performances, connecting, being these black bodies, the descendants of a stolen people on the stolen land, just like the absolute trance states I get into playing music for 8 hours and like communing with nature and like deciding which notes to hit and like which spirituals to draw from. Like I get just such loud ancestor messages when I get to do that work.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I just had images of, oh my gosh, I forgot his name. I think it might be Victor now in Umbrella Academy, but there's this epic scene where he's playing the like violin and there's all this power happening around him, but it's like this
Mm.
culminating scene. Sorry to spoil it, but it's just this amazing, and the character like transitions to, so just everything you're talking about, this instrument and this character, and of like
Mm.
Elliot Page plays him, and yeah, it's just a really powerful moment, and that was coming to mind as you were describing that. There's something about art and music specifically that just like transcends time and generations.
Mm.
Like even some chords that we play that end up like being ancestral. Like there's just something in our bodies that
Yes.
knows it. It's passed from generation to generation. So that's amazing that that
Mhm.
note is still resonating with you as you're activating it for other people too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's what blew me away when I went to Ghana. So I was in a very classical music scene. I was the fly in the buttermilk. Like I was the only black kid in that orchestra, and, playing Shostakovich and Beethoven and like playing this music by dead white dudes, and it's still just making me weep and just still activating something in me. And then going to Ghana, like, I mean, like my first geo lesson, I sat there and I was like, okay, so like, what's the tuning of this? Where's my sheet music? They're like, no, repeat after me. I was like, oh, what?
Mm.
And it was just, it completely transforms my art life to like learn the way my ancestors learned and to also not be the fly in the buttermilk anymore. But the thing that blew me away learning the songs is just like, oh, right. And then that's how we get gospel music. And that's where the blues comes from. And that's where hip hop comes from. Like, it's just such a beautiful through line. Like my ancestors could not write down these things for me. They could not leave me, this, we were talking before we started recording, how frustrating the traditional archives are, and especially for Black Americans. Like, it's a miracle I know some of their names. I actually have some of the writings of my firstborn free ancestor, which is incredible. But like through music, like I think that scene in Sinners where all of the ancestors and all of the future generations come in through music, I lost it. Like, I understand that feeling so clearly. And like, shout out to Ryan Coogler for capturing that so perfectly. But like, yeah, I think one of the greatest sins of the transatlantic slave trade, especially in the United States, was how much they tried to erase our connection to the ancestors. Because what was really unique about the United States was that we were forcibly separated by tribe and ethnicity. So our languages would die within a generation on the plantation. It was illegal for us to read or write, so we couldn't capture what had happened. And, we're still fucking here. And I still am able to know these things. I'm still able to know these songs, to find these names. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was one of my favorite things I learned about like different types of revolutionary history was that songs became ways of sending messages and,
Mhm.
letting people know that there were like slave catchers out on the patrol. And like there's all these ways that they like subtly and like brilliantly crafted revolution without getting
Mhm.
caught or being, just like underground about it. And how we're still echoing that today, like as we're living in this era of like tech watching everything we're doing, monitoring
Yeah.
things, like we're still finding ways to like circumvent these systems to like get the information we need to our people to keep them safe.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, it's incredible to think that like no matter what happens, we'll always be creative and innovative and like 10 steps ahead and that
Yeah.
they'll keep trying, but there's no way for them to take us out.
Mm.
And I think that is also just a huge testament of just ancestry in general, of like we have this innate ability to survive and like I think also beautifully like to collaborate. And another part of like revolutionary history I love is like learning about how communities who were oppressed like joined together and like had to learn
Mhm.
each other's languages and
Hell yeah.
cultures and like how to bridge these communities together to like fight a common enemy. All that to say, love it. Here for it. Music that makes you move, music that makes you like survive, but just empowering as well.
And I love the oral history of it. I'm going to
Mhm.
tell you how to do this. I'm going to show you how to do
Mhm.
this, and then you're going to learn it. And we've talked about archives before. We were talking about it earlier, and you and I have talked about it also before, Lazarus, just about how who has access to
Yeah.
archives. And, when we've been trying to do research, I know you've been doing research on a project recently where it was really hard to find particular archives. Like when I was doing research on The Whistle, when we were making the film Major, like there's so many things that aren't there. And it's often about who has the stability and the means to hold on to those things
Yeah.
safely and take them from place to place, and then to have them left somewhere, to have someone who's in another stable position to pass them down to, or have them put somewhere safe. And I also it got me thinking. I've been thinking a lot lately about the trans archives and studies that were destroyed in the Holocaust,
Yeah.
and how when we depend on, like, these things are really important, like documents are important. I'm all about saving documents, but when we rely on that, things get lost. And when
Yeah.
we are passing things down to the people that are coming after us, to younger people or to people who come to us and want to learn, whether it be in our family lineage or like in our trans lineage, that those things, they can't be destroyed. Like those
Yeah.
are going to go on, and they might be changed over time, but
Mhm.
that's how it works. Like nothing is truly even if it's on a piece of paper or even if it's a photograph, you're still going to tell that story differently over time or interpret it differently over time. So I don't think it's any less relevant when you don't have like the physical proof that something existed or how it
Yeah.
was done.
1,000%. And that's just like the white anthropologist just being like, and then everything else is folklore. And it's like, well, folklore
Mm-hmm.
is why I'm still here. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm
Mhm.
working on a project right now looking at like the queer and trans history of Route 66. And Stormy Miguel, I was in this group specifically for queer and trans New Mexicans, and we're the official archive has been just so gnarly to navigate because what we're really missing is photographs. And I'm like, does anyone have photographs from life in these gay bars on Central Avenue, which is Route 66, from like 1970 to the early 2000s? Like, that's what we're really needing. And half of the comments were like, there's this incredible documentary called The Whistle. It is exactly what you're looking for. And I was like, yes, thank you so much. I love it. Also, here's an article I wrote about it. Yes, Stormy Miguel is brilliant. But I was very excited to share that with you on mic of just like, everyone was so excited to recommend it. And I was like, yes, thank you.
I have a confession to make. I saw that post and I didn't comment because I was like too damn shy. I was like, what? Like, I'm just going to enjoy that from here. I meant to mention to you that, but I was lurking in that whole thread.
Good. I'm glad you got your flowers. But yeah, like the magic of folklore. And one of the things that's helped my work, especially with Stage the Tectonic Blackness, is the Federal Writers Project, where they drove around the South and just like interviewed Black people on their porch and were like, what was enslavement like? What songs did you sing? And I just did some soundscaping for Nikisha Breeze, who's a brilliant Black artist based in Taos. She was like one of the headliners for the Sydney Biennale. I don't know how to say that word because I'm not fancy enough in the art word, Biennial Biennale. But for that one, I centered around, it was a recording I found that was Zora Neale Hurston, who is an ancestor I love and adore, just like brilliant writer, brilliant researcher, turned anthropology on its head in a way that needed to happen. And it was her singing. And it was just such a gift of, she was explaining how this folk song was passed from West Africa to the Bahamas. And then when it came to the US, how it got reinterpreted as called Dat Crow or Crow Dance. And like, as you kind of unravel it, it's like, oh, the crow was actually maybe a vulture when it was in Africa. And the vulture is actually a symbol of Oshun. And as it goes through all of these iterations, all the different, stops of the diaspora, and to hear Zora Neale Hurston's voice through my computer speakers 100 years later, it was just like such immense gratitude for that archive. So Nikisha's been working with those closely with their project, Living Histories Project. They took over a warehouse in Sydney. They built a giant white tree. They recreated a slave shack and filled it with images of people that were formerly enslaved. And we scouted for people to read their stories out loud, to like literally breathe life into it. And it was such a beautiful process going through those applications. And we're like, okay, like maybe we can get 25. And we got almost 1,000 applications.
Oh my God.
Oh, wow.
And just like, like the questions were like, what is your relationship to Blackness? Like, what's your family story? And it was such an honor to read just all of these different threads of Blackness in America and like what it means for them to like breathe life into these ancestor stories. So it's kind of this, I don't know, like these archives exist and there's something about like blowing the dust off them and trying to keep them alive. Like one of the things I'm struggling with my dissertation is things keep disappearing off the internet as I'm trying to document them.
Yep.
Which is like terrifying. But part of me is also like, well, that's a new chapter to the dissertation now. But like the things that are controlled by the federal government just disappearing. Or there's a beautiful project that Mike.com did that in my master's thesis about trans murder memorials, I was like, this is the way you do it. It was like beautiful pictures, beautiful write-ups, infographics explaining, who in the trans community is most vulnerable. It's our Black and brown femme sisters. And it's just completely gone. And I'm grateful I took screenshots for my master's thesis. And then, the Stonewall Memorial, which is awful. It's just like 4 fucking white people. It's a literal whitewashed statue. Like the critique writes itself. But, it lost its status as like a national park. And then every time I went to the website, things kept changing of like, first they took the T off, then they took the B off. So just we're in this really strange fucking age of like trying to write everything down and a giant eraser is kind of coming behind it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I've been thinking a lot about that in terms of film and how, like all the things that we go to the internet to find, and like, how do we download those things? How do we get them on drives? But also, how do we get those drives to safe places outside of the United States? Or how do we get and the backup, the cloud backup in another country, right? Like, I've really been thinking about and talking to folks about how do we start to build that network of safekeeping for our digital material and some physical material as well, copies of it.
I think reminds me of the tradition of seed keeping and like Indigenous and Black communities. Like I order my seeds from this incredible organization. I believe it's called True Love Seeds, but like the watermelons I grow can be traced back to like someone who ran away from their plantation and stuck them in their pocket. And like the way we can trace these lineages, but there is like this temperature controlled doomsday bunker with seeds from like as many plants as possible. But like the predecessor to that is like every strain of okra you have in the United States was braided into an African woman's hair before she was forced on a ship. Same thing with indigo. Like so many of these plants that we have in the Americas, like my ancestors knew this might be the end of the world. I don't know what we're going to need. Let me put my food and my medicine on my person. And I feel that way with, I feel like, I'm like web pages might not, sustain, well, they'll sustain future generations in certain ways. Like,
But it's information.
yeah, information. There was a website that was dedicated to like alternative ways to get your hormones, was just blasted off the internet this week.
Mhm.
So yeah, let's get back to making zines. If you're living in another country and you are looking for a energetic, short black violist to marry, I'm Polly.
Hey.
I'll just put it out there.
Oh my gosh. Okay, as a Libra, I'm here for this message. I endorse this. Please, we'll have our first SANTES marriage. I'm very excited about that.
Oh my gosh.
I love how I'm enjoying this conversation. I'm like feeling so inspired about the ways that like everything we're doing right now has a purpose. Like whether or not we're documenting or we're creating or reading, like in this moment, like I feel like 10 years ago, I was just like queer and living my life and was like not
Mhm.
thinking about it too much, right? Of course, there's always been queerphobia and things happening, but I feel like now in this very moment, I'm like anything we do for our community means so much more and it has
Mhm.
such a huge impact. I'm meeting like younger trans people who are growing up in a time where they're being told they're not real or valid or their
Yeah.
rights are being taken away, and the things that like I took for granted 10 years ago are now like life-saving for them today. So I think it's just incredible, like, the archival work of showing young queer and trans people, like, we've been here for decades. Like, do
Yes.
not forget that this happened. I know when I learned about like the earliest SRS surgery was in like 1920s or so, like
Yeah.
that was documented and still documented. That blew my mind. I thought it was something from the 60s that was new with like
Mhm.
Christina Jorgensen or whatnot. But like, no, it was the 1920s. And I'm sure there was someone before that too, right? But like all of this
Yeah.
history where like when I found that out, I really felt confident that like being trans is something that's not new. It's been around for 100 years and it's been medically documented, but they won't
Mhm.
let you know that, right? They want to like erase all of this history, and they did try to, but like we keep holding on to it, and we are living examples of it still happening. That like we are the
Yeah.
example that like you can be trans at 5, 10, 50, 100 years old and like it's not going to change. So it's just, yeah, I'm loving how like we are also the seeds, like the things that we create, but like we as
Mm.
people are the seeds showing that like we will persist no matter what the culture is like.
Yeah, and I
Oh
think we
yeah.
have like our Black and Indigenous ancestors to thank for that, right? We have
Mhm.
been shown how to do this like long before
Yes.
we were convening as trans people in the way that we are now, even in the way that we were in the 60s. Like we are seeing how language and stories and resources and seeds are passed on, and those have not necessarily had to have been through blood lineage, right? Like
Yeah.
some of us don't have any connection to our blood lineage, but we do have connection to ancestors, and we do have connection to our, I don't know, our source, our, those
Mhm.
seeds and where we come from. And that
Mhm.
goes for, I think that goes for being trans as well. And,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah, I think about that a lot. Like, I learned how to be Black and how to be Irish from my family, and like very like clear lineage. But like, as queer and trans people, it's like, oh, I have to go outside usually your blood family for this folklore, for this strength. And like, I have a comb in here somewhere. I'll find it later, I'm sure. But I got it when I was in Ghana, and it's of Sankofa, which is a bird placing an egg on its back. And I'm wearing a very cool bird T-shirt right now. I'm very much in my birding era. My 30s hit me like a truck. But like the theory of Sankofa is she's placing this egg on her back, and it's looking to the past to help the future. And I get so much strength from working with the youth and like meeting young trans kids. I used to facilitate this camp called Queer Oriented Radical Days of Summer, Chords, and meeting a Black trans kid who got hormone blockers. And it's like, oh, like top surgery is just like not even the cards for you because you'll just never grow that tissue. Like it blew my mind. And also seeing how much fear they have and like reminding them like, these fights aren't new. These tactics aren't new. There's so much to learn, especially from our Black and Indigenous ancestors. Like I mentioned, just we've survived the end of the world so many times and it's happening again. And like, we've got the tools, we've got the technologies. And what I'm really trying to focus on is not being all consumed by my despair. Like Luna, what you were saying, like whatever I can do for my community counts right now. Like I can't always be on the front lines. I don't do great in crowds, but like I can volunteer with mutual aid and drop off food places. Or one of the things we're doing now is I finally moved out of the house that I was almost murdered in. I'm a very stubborn Taurus, and I was like, you can't make me. But now I have acreage, which is something I never thought I'd have. And so we planted an orchard, which is something Harriet Tubman did when she got free. She had an orchard up north, and Black folks could just come every weekend and pick whatever they wanted, whatever they needed. And that's the goal for planting these trees. Just any way you give back counts. And like, I don't know, some days I can't show up for self-care for myself, but I can show up to take care of myself as like a fuck you to the systems that want me dead. I call it spite self-care. I encourage everyone to try it. Take that, transphobia. I took my meds.
Aggressively living out of spite. I'm here for it.
I'm more than fine. I'm quite alright. Equanimity, sweet serenity. Nothing lasts forever. You just learn to weather this one wild life. Beauty and the strife.
Well, thinking, okay, so you're talking about youth that you've been working with, and I think about this way, way in the future, but like they're going to want to give back, and then they're going to want to reach out to you for guidance when you become an ancestor. And I'm wondering, how do they get your attention, or how does anyone get your attention when you become an ancestor? Thinking about, what kind of smells, what kind of foods, what goes on the altar to get Ancestor Lazarus's attention.
I really loved reflecting on this. I love the scent of roses. Florida water will do. I live out where there's just so many junipers, and I love those so much. And I've been trying to connect more with my Irish ancestors, and that's something they really like. Pizza. I'm a simple guy. It's my entire food pyramid is just a slice of pizza. And just like anything gathered from a garden with love, or like swiped from a fancy botanical garden. And lavender.
That's a good smelling altar.
It is, right? I'm a Taurus. There's so many things burning in my house right now to set the mood.
Okay, so let's say we're having a potluck for the dead, and this is, again, years later. Luna and I are old as hell, and we're needing to go and bring something for you for the altar, and we are running late, and the only place that is open for some reason is the flea market over at the State Fair in Albuquerque. And so that's the only place. And it's, that's a big flea market. So we need to kind of know exactly which booth we're going to pick up the thing that is going to do you right. What would that be?
Any sort of like exotic popcorn. Not to name drop. I mentioned I'm from Indiana, but I grew up in the place where Orville Redenbacher had his first factory. So every year we'd have this huge popcorn festival. That was all that was going on in this town.
You name dropping Orville.
Not to name drop celebrities. I'm kind of a big deal. But yeah, I'm like very much like a popcorn purist because of that. But I do love like a flea market neon dyed kettle corn.
Okay.
I will come flying in to help.
Okay. That's something to know.
I was put onto popcorn like way too late in life. Like I only had the microwavable ones for the longest, but then like
welcome.
Yeah.
Well, I remember it was such a treat when they started having the whole stores that would serve It was just a store for popcorn, and I remember that just seemed so fancy when I was a youth.
Yeah, I was from a city for popcorn, baby. Like that was it was the popcorn and the Klan. That was kind of all that was going on in that town. Yeah.
My clever pops snuck to the pond. loving pops, got Mother Goose to play along. With a helping hand from nature, he wrecked their lawn. Fuck you, we don't care where we belong.
I want to ask you a silly question.
Ooh, okay.
What is the hottest gossip you ever heard about one of your ancestors?
Ooh,
Oh, shit.
that is such a good question.
I love that so much.
That was a curveball.
Or even rumor.
Yeah, I think it's hot gossip that is in the Library of Congress, like documented. Like this is rare. Like I know you're just talking about like formal archives, blah blah blah. But the ancestor whose picture I showed you, Susie Spencer, she was my first ancestor born free, and her dad, Dempsey Spencer, who stole a horse from the plantation, rode it. He crossed a river that he shouldn't have survived, and rivers are like very important to my spirituality. Crossed a river he shouldn't have survived and made it to a Union Army base camp, and so it was free. And the thing that always stuck with me is he sent the horse back. Like he was being chased by his owner's son, and he sent the horse back. He's like, I'm not a thief. But anyways,
Wow.
something wild that happens if you escape the bondage of enslavement, get free, and fight and die for your country is that your former enslaver can get your fucking Union pension, which is what happened in my family. And so my Aunt Susie was like writing the government and like trying to provide documentation of like, we should be getting, like, my daddy died for this fucking country that hated him. Least I can do is get some money. And they interviewed people that were on the plantation with them, talking about their ceremony of jumping the broom, because what they were arguing is that it wasn't an official wedding. But I still haven't gone through all of them. Like it just, I don't know about y'all, like when I work with archive material, sometimes I get like woozy, or I get woozy in museums if there's just like too much
Yeah.
energy. And it's just like wild, like reading the words of my ancestor from the 1800s being like, fuck you, pay me, to the US government.
Yes.
Which is why she lives in my office. And whenever I'm like, I can be a big boy and send that email. If this woman that was like 20 years removed from enslavement was like, hey, fuck you, Uncle Sam. I don't know if that counts as gossip, but it's something I'm still pissed about.
Yeah.
Absolutely counts. That's incredible. That's incredible. And you're owed a pension is what I'm hearing.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yeah. They interviewed like the enslaver's son, like depicting my ancestors' escape from the plantation.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a dream of mine is to try to retrace that path. I think I can figure it out based on the county where the plantation was in Missouri, and then my family. They're called exodusters, people that came to like Kansas or New Mexico instead of doing the Great Migration north. But I'd love to like trace that path back, or leave an offering at that river, or sue the U.S. government for that Civil War pension.
I hope you get all of it.
Thank you.
All of it.
All of it. You deserve it all.
Here's your $2 silver.
With interest, of course.
Yes, yeah.
Interest, back pay.
Mhm.
If I'm wearing furs in the next interview, you know what happened.
I signed a non-disclosure. I can't tell you why I'm wearing these furs, but you know.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm just kidding, PETA. I'm a vegetarian. I would not do that.
Very fancy faux furs. They exist.
Yes.
So in your pre-ancestor state, what are you up to? What are you doing? What do you want folks to know about?
Yeah, I'm living my best life, which I'm taking a lot of naps. I'm less than a month post-op, so I'm just a very sleepy bear. I'm playing around town with the leftist folk band Eileen and the In-Betweens. I am writing various things. I'm allegedly working on my dissertation, which I mentioned before. And I think the part that I'm most excited about with my dissertation, and another ancestor I'd like to invite into this space is my ancestor Trigger Slim, who, if you have an ancestor named Trigger Slim, I've of course written a country song for him, but he was locally famous in Kansas for shooting a sawed-off shotgun at the Klan. And then he had to go into hiding for a very long time, but he was a very short an angry man, and I find a lot of kinship with him. But that he survived a lynching attempt. I consider myself a lynching survivor. So kind of looking at these two attempts 100 years apart, and like, what does that mean for being Black in AmeriCorps? And I think what I'm really trying to do with that dissertation is rethinking violence that Black trans people face under this long arc of lynching in America, that lynching has always been about race and gender, and that it's kind of that Sankofa I was talking about a lot earlier, of like reaching back and looking at those lynching activists like Ida B. Wells, and the way that we came together as a community when Black cis men were getting lynched across America, and rising up for our Black trans sisters right now. Like, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Yeah. And it's not easy to write. And it's also like ending my dissertation with my own murder attempt is kind of like daring my committee. Like, do you really want to fail me? Really? Poor old me. But I think there's good arguments in addition to me maybe begging for sympathy to pass my dissertation. But I'm hoping that might be a book someday. And then, yeah, making weird little viola loops in the deserts with my homies and Stages of Tectonic Blackness. That's showing in a lot of museums. The one that we did in Blackdom, which is a Black ghost town close to Roswell. Shout out to Storm Miguel. We love Roswell. But yeah, that's playing in the Tacoma Museum and a few other museums around the country that I can't remember. But that was a very cool project.
Do you think it'll show up in any museums in New Mexico at any time?
Oh, yeah. It was at the National Hispanic Cultural Center for a year, and then it's going to be playing in Santa Fe. Oh, it'll be playing in Santa Fe in April.
Ooh, I wonder if I'll be there, because my secret hope was that I'll be able to go on there if there was something, but I had no idea. Yeah, keep me posted.
I will, yeah.
Does your band have anything coming up?
I think we have a show every weekend of Pride.
Okay.
Follow Eileen and the In-Betweens on Instagram for more. I'm just the pretty boy fiddler that shows up when I'm told.
That's a dream gig.
It really is, yeah.
Yes.
Just point to where my stool is and let me play.
Love. And then is there anywhere that folks can find you that you would like to be found?
Yeah, my website, www.lazarusletcher.com. I post all of my articles there and any speaking engagements that I have or shows with the band. And then you can also find me on Instagram at l.nuzzles, like how you would nuzzle a beloved cat.
Nuzzle.
Yes, everyone, I really encourage you to check out Lazarus's website. They have amazing music and film up there, so check it out if you have a chance. Otherwise, Lazarus, it's been so great to have you on our podcast. I'm so glad you were able to join us.
Thanks for having me.
So dreamy. Thank you, Lazarus.
Wow. This conversation blew me away. I am so impressed by the amount of research and history that Lazarus holds, not only for their own ancestry, but for that of all trans people. I'm feeling particularly grateful that they're documenting trans history as it is literally being erased before our eyes right now.
Exactly. It is so important that we keep archives of our literature, music, art, and movements so that future generations can remember where the resistance has been and what they can learn from it. Thank you so much, Lazarus, for all of the ways you're contributing to this act of love and resistance.
Speaking of being remembered, we encourage all of our listeners to give instructions on how to be honored when they pass. If you feel so compelled to do so, please check out our SANTES form on our website at www.santesproject.com.
And when you're done filling out the form, let us know what you think of this episode by commenting on our Instagram page at SANTES Project.
Thanks for listening. See you on the other side.
And this one too.
SANTES is written and produced by Lunimer Bruja and Storm Miguel Flores. Editing and theme music by Storm Miguel Flores.
The 3 song segments in this episode, Equanimity, Birdseed, and Anything, are written and performed by Lazarus Letcher.